what I'm going to do is quickly, just for anyone who doesn't know me and my story, just a quick little about me. My name is Leanne Brennan. So I've been a professional artist ever since I graduated college in 2004. So I'm 40 years old. I have 2 kids. I live in North Carolina with my husband. And, it was this slow journey because I was a professional artist. I worked in a video game company. I got in there at a really cool time when they were making Guitar Hero and Rock Band. I jumped over to an innovation consultancy, working with like some of the world's largest brands as a motion designer. So I've been a professional for a while. And in that journey, I kind of lost my personal practice. It's like I was all in college doing stuff for myself. But when I graduated, I was using my creative skill set at work. So when I got home, I wasn't really thinking about anything creative. I just wanted to like chill and relax and be with my friends that then later turned into family. And it was this slow kind of like progression that crept up on me. And I didn't realize how much I was missing my personal artwork. And it wasn't until I quit my job to stay home with my daughter and became a stay-at-home mom that I realized, oh my gosh, I have attached my entire identity to myself at work, my creative self at work. And it sent me into this spiral where I was like, I've got to get my personal creative self back, but I didn't know how. I was basing it on who I used to be, which was like this powerhouse of a worker bee that didn't have kids and, had all the energy in the world. I was in my 20s. So every time I went to take on a personal project, I was basing it on who I used to be. So I was scoping it as like this big thing because it was like, okay, well, if I'm gonna spend time on this after work, it better be worth it. Like it better be impressive. It better make money. And I majored in animation. So I remember the first time I tried to get back into my personal creative practice when I was home with my daughter. She was around 2 years old. I was like, yeah, I'm going to make a independent animation and I'm going to apply to film festivals and it's going to like get awards. It's going to be amazing. And I like started it and quickly gave up because it was way too complicated. It didn't fit with who I was in that moment, which was a mom taking care of a small child. It had been 10 years since I had created anything for myself. So to jump straight into a big project like that, of course I gave up. Of course it was overwhelming. It was too big. But I didn't see that at the time. And from that moment, that was back in, I don't know, like 2000, I forget, it was a while ago. I had a series of starts and stops, just like that, where I'd be like, I'm going to do a big painting series. And I would like stretch these big canvases. And I hadn't painted in so long. So I would like start and then get intimidated and stop and like pack it all away again. And then get down on myself and shame myself for like not getting it going. And it was just on repeat, me just like picking these projects that were too big, that did not align with my current self or my energy level or my responsibilities. And it just didn't match up. And my story of like stepping back into my personal creative practice in a way that made sense, it was this learning of like, oh my gosh, I have to lower the stakes. I have to compromise. And like nobody wants to hear that as a creative. We don't want to hear that word compromise, right? It's like, wait, but no, I have all these big dreams. I want this to be something. But I had to table that and say like, yes, Leanne, you get to have that. You get to make a big, impressive thing, but we're not going to start there because you're tired and you don't really have a lot of time, do you? And you're overwhelmed. So like, can we please just take the pressure off and start with something easy. So that's really been my platform that I'm trying to bring to the world, especially for artists that have like day jobs or kids, or most of the day we're doing other things. I'm trying to bring this message to the world that it's okay to pare it back. It's okay to lower the stakes with what we want to do, and it will still lead you somewhere. And I have been shocked. You see the art behind me. This is what I ended up doing. It all started on paper. So like, this is what I was able to do. I had this clipboard with like, recycled computer paper that I would like journal and sketch on, because that's what I could do while I had a little kid running around. And then at night, I would just like for a couple of minutes trace those drawings in Procreate on my iPad. And like little by little, I started to get this collection of drawings, which is what you see behind me, which is my business Epic Bones, where I'm selling art prints and now affirmation decks. I'm working on my second one. This is my first one. So if you go to epic_bones on Instagram, you can see my work. I never would have thought that this is where I would be with these like simple black and white drawings, just keeping it the same character, just no color, just black and white. And I've been able to chip away at my creative goals in these little 20 minutes here. Some days it's just like 2 minutes, literally just 2 minutes of just like a little tracing. That's all I could do that day. But it all accumulates and it all builds. So that's what I'm hoping to get us to by the end of this workshop, is this acceptance of our current life situations and this reframing of like, well, maybe I could do something else that's related to that big shiny thing that I wanted, but that's much more simple, much less intimidating, much smaller, and that fits with who I am today. So the first thing that I did, and this is getting into our workbook now, the first step that I took to really be able to do this was really like a grieving process. I really did. I remember this day where I just was so sad. I was just like, I've got to say goodbye to who I used to be. I've got to release this part of me that was my old creative self. So in your workbook, there's a place to kind of like have some gratitude for who you used to be, but also to allow yourself to feel those feelings of loss. And it's going to be different for everyone. For me, it was, ever since high school, I would get, after school, after I did my homework, I would draw. I would just have hours in my bedroom, either drawing self-portraits to see like how close I could get it to reality, or copying pictures of magazines. My mom had subscriptions to all these fashion magazines, and I would copy it. I'd be like, okay, how good can I get it? How close can I get it to this woman in this picture? And that's what I would do. For whatever reason, it just brought me joy. It was very meditative. It was just copying, and I loved it. I had so much time for it. And then I went to college. Again, literally 4 years of dedicated time to work on my personal art self. So much time, no responsibilities, no kids, no husband. It was just me and the world. When I graduated college, same thing. So much time, so much time. I wish I had known how much time I truly had. But now, so different, right? I have a 2-year-old son. I have an 8-year-old daughter. I have a husband. I have other goals to like exercise and all these things. My day is packed. I'm not that person that I used to be. So I really had to say goodbye and say, like, thank you. Thank you, past self. We had some good times, didn't we? Thank you, past self, for, exploring these parts of yourself and drawing when you could and you had time. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And then goodbye, like really just sitting there and saying, I've got to let you go. I'm not you anymore. You are not me. And we have to part ways. And it's very sad. And you go through so many emotions when you do this. It's like you're sad, you're angry, you know, it's really like the stages of grief, right? You're in denial, you're like, no, you're feeling confused, lost, like, and you might not do this now in this workshop, but take a moment after this workshop to really feel those feelings and maybe do like some meditation or something to sit with yourself and be like, yeah, you know what? I'm not that person anymore. And that is gonna bring up some stuff for you. Let me know in the chat if this is landing with you. Like, do you see that difference? Like, do you see the difference of who you used to be, like this past self? And do you think that you could let that person go? And this might be like, it might take a little time to do that. And for some of you, it might not be this happy, bubbly story that I have of like, oh my gosh, I had all this time to draw. You might be sitting here thinking like, well, I didn't go to art school. I don't have training in music, or I didn't go to school for writing, like whatever you want to do. That's okay. Like you can thank your past self for like all the experiences that you had in your life that have allowed you to be the person that you are today. Like if you're a writer, maybe your past self just had so much, you know, time and space to get to know your friends and like go out to coffee and really like get deep in these relationships that has now like built all this sensitivity to the world that's going to allow you to apply that to whatever creative practice that you want. So don't think like, oh, geez, I don't have Leanne's story. Whatever your story is, that's who we're kind of like thanking. Thank you for that time. Thank you for that space. Thank you for who you allowed me to be. But just really like letting that person go in the same breath. Let me know in the chat if that is landing for you. Do you feel like you're able to let go of this past self? I'm curious if this is hitting for you. And then the next stage of that is really to like, okay, like we've said goodbye, like can we now acknowledge our current self? Like, who are you today? Who are you really? Like, how is your life different from what it used to be? And for me, it's all about kids. It's like, oh my gosh, all from the moment I wake up at like 5 a.m. when my son wakes me up, it's like you're on, and not until that child goes to bed. And it's a lot. It's so much. I've got to like coordinate getting my daughter from school, and like I'm freelancing, so I'm like sneaking in time. I have a babysitter coming sometimes, and like that's how it's just, my world is just crazy. But I still want to be able to do some semblance of personal artwork. So I have to like accept my current state. Lisa's saying this is definitely landing for me. Awesome. Yeah, I think I need some time to really visualize who I was. Yeah, like you might need to do this offline, print out the workbook, or just like have some notes out and think about like, who was I even? And go through that process. But for me, my current self is like, okay, mom with kids, you have maybe 20 minutes tops to yourself after those kids go to bed. Because the other time is like catching up with my husband, taking a shower, like cleaning up the kitchen. You know, these kids go to bed at like 8 o'clock. I'm like, okay, I have basically maybe 2 hours if I can even make it till 10 o'clock. But the allotment of time for my personal artwork is so small. So for me to take on a big project, like I see these drawings behind me for Epic Bones, I see them as like animations and art installations and like all this cool stuff, but I can't start there. Because if I were to try and fit that in to those little 20 minutes after the kids go to bed when I'm like exhausted, I would be like, no, that's way too much. I'm not doing that. Like, it's too overwhelming. It's too big. But for this, I can do this. I can draw on paper. That's okay. That fits into my 20 minutes, you know, and I really, it's this, it's this reckoning with your current self. And it's like, what can we do? What is our life like? Like, what would even fit in there, you know? And for some of you, it might not be time. Like, time might not be your limitation, you know, it might be something else. But really think about, like, how is your life different? Who are you today? Um, yeah, definitely like take some time after this. And in your workbook, I've split it up into these two columns because some of it can be life circumstance obstacles. So for life circumstance, I'm thinking like you have a demanding day job, you have kids, you have health issues, you have like ADHD or something like that. That's like a life circumstance limitation or obstacle. So like write those down. Like, what's going on right now for you right now? Do you have chronic pain? Do you have, like, what are you up against? And really allow that to be on the page. Like, let's bring it to the table instead of just trying to like bully ourselves and be something we're not, right? It's like, no, okay, I have these time constraints. If you have a health issue, you're like, no, okay, I do have a health issue. Like, really own it and allow it to like be a part of your process. So there's the life circumstance obstacles, and then the other side, it's the mindset obstacles. So these can be like overwhelm, like intimidation, like imposter syndrome comes up a lot, indecision, you know, anything like that, where you're just thinking about what's been blocking me from getting started on my creative self. Like, I know I feel this tug to like do something for my personal creative self, but there's something that there's just this wall that's always in front of me and I can never seem to cross it. And then, like, some of that stuff is going to be in our head. And it's these two realities. It's like our life circumstance and the mindset stuff, and put those together. And it's like, of course we're not starting, right? It's like, especially if your day is crazy, but we've got to put it on the table. We've got to look at it, because if we try and ignore it, then we're going back to this past self thing where, or this imaginary self where we're comparing ourselves to others and saying like, oh, well, I should be able to write a book, you know? And it's like, okay, but are you taking into account what's going on for you right now? Or you're just saying that you should be able to write a book, you know? And it's really this acknowledgement, this acceptance of like, no, this is me. This is who I used to be. This is my current me. This is what I'm up against. Can we just please map that out so that we know what we're working with, right? Like, we need to know what we're working with, because then we can do the work to craft some sort of practice or project that makes sense with that person, that's going to align with that person. And it just gets to start there and then build into something more complicated, more complex, more of that North Star that you maybe originally had in your head. But we can't just skip the line. We can't just jump there. We've got to start with who we are today and let it organically and naturally build. Because if we try to force it, and if we try to jump like straight to the book or straight to the painting series to apply to galleries or whatever it is, if we try to go 0 to 60, we're either going to burn ourselves out, we're going to just ignore our human, ignore our life circumstances, and we're going to stay up super late and like burn the candle at both ends and like go crazy on the weekends. And then we're going to burn ourselves out. We're not going to enjoy the process. And then we're going to need to recover for like months, maybe even years, before we can pick back up again on something new. And that's not fun. We don't want to do that. Or we're going to do what I did, which is like, we're constantly going to start and then stop because it was too big. So it doesn't work. It doesn't work to force something that doesn't align with who we are, with our current ability, our current skill set, our current energy, our current life circumstances. It just doesn't make sense. So that's why I want you to fill out that section and the acknowledge your current self, to really put that on the table and let it be there. And let me know in the comments, what are some of your life circumstance obstacles or mindset obstacles that you might be noticing that maybe you didn't even realize, like, oh, maybe I didn't even realize that was a thing, but maybe it is. Let me know in the chat. I'd love to hear from you. I know it's like intimidating to share and don't feel pressure to share, but it's fun to know what's going on with everyone. So from there, it's like we have this choice, right? And in your workbook, I have this funny like yes or no checkbox, but I find it really helpful to just ask ourselves this question, like, can you accept the life that you have? Like, yes or no? You know, are you willing to explore some other options? And if the answer is no, it's like, okay, well, where does that leave us? It leaves us where we were before. And we're just sitting there like stuck, and we're sitting there with pressure, and we're sitting there disappointed. So it's almost like the answer, it has to be yes, right? It has to be yes. We have to be willing to accept who we are today, because otherwise we're just going to be sitting stuck the way we were before you joined this workshop. And that's just no fun. That's why you're here. It's like, there's got to be another way. So I love to have this checkbox to really like reinforce, like, yes, I am choosing a different path, and I'm willing to start like opening my mind up to alternative realities. And like some of those aren't going to feel good. Like it didn't feel good for me to compromise on my artistic self. When I first started these drawings, I was like, where is this even going? Like, why am I even doing this? You know, it was this reckoning, this acceptance that I'm bringing you through. It was like, okay, Leanne, like this is all we can do right now. I get it. Let's do that. But it was also this kind of like, oh, well, what's the point of even doing these drawings? And you're going to have all these thoughts, but you've got to like learn to push those aside and do it anyway. And that's what I did. And lo and behold, after doing 100 of these black and white drawings, it became very clear what I was doing. It became very clear, like the path that I wanted to take with these. And if I had, you know, sat down and thought like, okay, what is the path that I want to take? And started this like intellectual conversation, it wouldn't have worked. So it was really me just going through this self-acceptance, really looking at what am I available for right now, given my life circumstances, and can I trust that if I start and if I go down this path of simple and easy, it will get me to where I want to go. And that trust piece is huge. And it does not come naturally, and it did not come naturally to me. So don't think that you're alone in that. If you're like, yeah, but if I compromise, like, where would that even take me? Like, that is so natural to think. Fatima is saying, I'm struggling with making the choices for too long. I do not finish projects I start for myself easily. Yes, I I was in that boat as well. Struggle with change due to mild hidden autism. Yeah, so like you're also up against a life circumstance obstacle as well, right? So it's true. It's like, unless we can refigure and like reframe our process to fit who we are, of course we're going to have starts and stops, right? Steph says, we'll be moving from my home state for the first time in my life. Excited, but so scared. Awesome. That is exciting. And again, like that is a life circumstance obstacle. Moving is like a big deal, right? And we might tell ourselves like, oh, I can't take on a creative practice or project in the middle of moving, in the middle of this life circumstance. But if you craft it to match who you are today, like as a person who is moving, then it will be scoped to fit into that type of life. And it could be the very thing that saves you during this time of uncertainty and instability, right? So sometimes that's what our creative practices can do for us. Lisa says, one thing that's coming up for me is that when I grew up, everyone was encouraging me to make vision boards and dream big. Oh my gosh, I can very much relate to this. And yes, the pressure, it puts so much pressure on ourselves. Yes, I am very similar in that situation. Yep. Starting small. Yeah. So this is a big one. And this is my story because I've always been like the straight A student, the one who got the scholarship to art school. You know, like I've always been the one that was like pushed, yeah, to like dream big, be the best. But it does put so much pressure on ourselves, especially when you're trying to branch out like outside of work, outside of your work self. It's like, yeah, we can like do the whole like job title thing and like where we work, and that can be impressive. But when we go to our personal self, that's a very vulnerable place to be. And that is a place that takes time to see some sort of tangible success, in quotes. And that's what can really crush us, because we put the pressure that we, you know, have this conditioning around like be the best, dream big on our personal creative practice or project. And that can just, you know, put the fire right out in 2 seconds. And that's what I was up against. I kept looking to the outside to say like, okay, Leanne, well, you know, you're a stay-at-home mom, you have some time now that your 2-year-old is sleeping, you know, you should be able to do something for your personal creative self. That's why I chose the independent animation, because I was like looking to the outside world, what would be impressive? Oh, it would be impressive to apply to a film festival and win an award. Whereas really, like, it wasn't even about, like, I didn't even really want to make an animation like that. I was just basing it off of what I did in college because that's the track I was on. I really just wanted to do something, anything for myself. But the pressure of it being impressive or worth it because I was going to be taking time out to do it, it crushed me. And very similar story. I didn't do it. I did like 15 frames of that animation and then I put it in a drawer and I never saw it again. So Jennifer says, you got this, be patient. Oh, that's so nice. I love the encouragement. Okay, so now let's go back to our workbook. Now we need to really like ground into who you are today. And now we're going to start to say, okay, we have accepted our life circumstances. We see now that we are in a different place than we were before. We've released our past. Let's ground into like, what comes easy for us? And this is what I am all about. And my like message to the world, can we just let it be easy? Can we just pick something that naturally comes to us without like a fuss? And that is so hard. And that relates to the pressure thing. It is so hard to do, especially with like social media, everyone sharing like their best artwork or writing or music, like all the time. Like nobody's showing all the crappy drawings that it took to get there, or nobody's showing, you know, the drafts that are in the trash. Nobody's showing all the horrible songs that like didn't make it to the album. And it's really hard to look at ourselves and say, like, could I do something easy? Could I just start where I'm at? Is that okay, even? And I'm here to say, like, yes, it is okay. It has to be. It has to be okay, because you won't do it if it doesn't feel good. And if it's easy, it will feel good because it's a sensory experience. And it's like, if it's easy and if it feels good, you will return to it every day. And the returning is that consistency. And the only way we can get to the more impressive thing is if we show up. And we're not going to show up to something that's too hard, especially not if we have other stuff going on in our day. We're not going to show up for it. It's very easy to find something else that could fill that 20 minutes. So by making it easy and saying like, maybe I could just start with like what comes naturally to me. And that's what drawing is for me, pen on paper. And that's what I did on this like scrap piece of paper or in a like notebook or something. All these drawings, like drawing after drawing. This is for my new deck. Like this is how I start. I just start on paper, on a clipboard that's like, you know, all around the house. If I have a second, I'll draw on it. And when I first got back into my personal practice, I was really second guessing that. I'm like, is that enough? Just like drawing? Because I was coming from this big fancy animation background, right? It's like, that can't be enough, just drawing on paper on a clipboard. But yes, that was everything. And a lot of times it started with journaling that then turned into a sketch. And it really was this detachment from the outcome and saying like, can we just start with making art just for us? Like not associated with it being for everything. And can we trust that if we do enough of that, it will turn into something useful maybe in the future. But for now, it's just going to be for us. And when it's for us, we can pick something that feels good. So for you, you know, if you're like, oh, I want to write this book, I want to write this book. And if you're thinking, okay, that, you know, I see that that's too big, that's too complicated. If you like writing, maybe it's writing a letter to a friend. You know, that's not as intimidating. You know, if you want to make a, I think Fatima mentioned like a memoir or an autobiography about her life, you know, like maybe we don't jump straight to the book. Maybe it's like, ooh, I'm gonna pick an imaginary friend or maybe a friend that I know and write them this letter about an event in my life. And that letter becomes like a short story. And now I have collections of all of these little events in my life that are short stories. Like that's much more doable to think like, oh, when I sit down tonight after work or when I sit down after the kids are at bed, like all I have to do is get on my computer and say like, dear Mary, I was thinking today about that time when I was, you know, 12 years old, and this is what it brought up for me. And now, like that, can you see how that's just so much easier? It's so much more approachable versus saying, like, okay, chapter 1, let me write my book. Like, oh my gosh, that sounds so intimidating, right? Like, do you see the difference? It's like pick something that's easy, that's more manageable. If you're a musician and you're thinking like, oh geez, you know, like I really need to get better at the guitar, or like I really want to make a music album, but you know, I want to make all these unique songs and I'm going to compose, like that is a lot, right? That is so much. Can we not start with the music album of like 8 original unique songs that you wrote? Can we start in an easy way? Like, oh, you like to sing in the car? Awesome. Like, can we just make an album of cover songs where we're just singing a cappella? Let's just do that. You know, that would be much easier. That would be much more fun. I would show up for that versus like, okay, like track 1, what am I gonna write? What am I gonna make for this first song on my music album? Like that's just, it's too big. It's too much, especially if you haven't had a consistent daily practice going. To jump straight to the music album, to jump straight to the book. Who do you think you are? Like nobody does that. You know, in all the history of creative people, Nobody's sitting down for like the first time in 10 years and being like, I'm going to write a best-selling novel. Like nobody does that. It's like these little tiny short stories that add up to something, and they're like writing in these little moments of time for like days upon weeks upon months. And they're writing because it feels good, because they love it, because it makes them feel like they have purpose in their life. They're not writing it for the book. Eventually it gets there, but they're not starting there. And that's what this is all about. It's like we've got to start in a way it's less crushing. It's less pressure. It's much more fun. Jennifer says it's almost like going back to our childlike curiosity. Exactly. About the art or writing or whatever I'm doing, writing or making it for its own sake. Exactly. And what comes up for people and what came up for me is, how can that be enough? How can that be something, to just go to my childlike self and draw, like that's not enough. I have to make impressive large scale oil paintings and apply to galleries and have a solo show. That's impressive. And so it's this constant like checking in with our ego and being like, okay, I see that dream. That's cool. But we can't start there. Leanne, like we cannot start with the large scale paintings. Like I see these as like big, beautiful paintings, like rendered in a very different way than they are now. And I am holding that vision for myself. I'm not saying I can't have that. What I'm saying is I'm not going to start there, because I know from all these years of all of these failed stops and starts that I will start and then I will give up because it's too big. I need to let it naturally evolve into that more complex, impressive, big, whatever it's going to be. And look what I've done with these little drawings that didn't seem like enough, right? Like I made them into something really cool, and I'm really proud of what they became. I didn't think they were going to go anywhere. I thought it was just going to be a mental health practice for myself to make these little drawings on paper and then to clean them up in my iPad. I didn't expect it to be for anything. And so it's this trust in ourselves, trust in the universe. Like if you believe in that, like whatever it is, it's like we've got to just believe that it will get there, wherever there is. And we don't know where there is. Like maybe by the time that I'm ready to evolve these drawings into something bigger, I won't want to do the painting series. I won't want to make the animations. I might want to go a different direction, but I've started, like I've gotten on the path. I've gotten on the path with what I'm able to do right now. And that's what we've got to do. So whatever your creative practice or project is, I want you to think about it and think about, like, in relation to that, how can you show up in a way that's so easy and so effortless? And if you need help with this, like this is what we can do in the Facebook group, or if you want to hash it out here in the chat, like let me know if you're like, oh my gosh, I have no idea. But start to think about that. There's a space in your workbook for lower the stakes. Like, how can you really set the bar low? And this is hard to do. How can you take it down a notch with this creative project or practice? Like, how can we make it less scary? How can we make it like so simple? It's almost like silly, like maybe it's, you thought you were going to be doing this large scale oil painting series, but you've gone through this reckoning and self-acceptance and realization of what you're up against now. And you're like, you know what? It has to be watercolors. Like I can't be getting into oil paints. I don't have the space, like my kids are running around. Like I will get there eventually. I'm going to start with watercolors because the setup is quicker. It's easier to do. I'm going to do small scale. I'm going to buy a little watercolor pad of you know, 10 by 10 watercolor paper, and I'm gonna just do a swirl of 2 different colors every day, just because I want to play. And I don't know where that's going to lead, but that's where I'm going to start because that's super easy. Like I can totally do that. That doesn't seem scary. That actually kind of seems like it would be really nice. Like I'll put on some music and I'll just do my swoops and swirls with watercolor. And it's like we don't let ourselves do that because of the conditioning we've had and because of the pressure that we put on ourselves for like what we're supposed to be doing. We look at that and we're like, how could that go anywhere? These little like swirly lines of watercolor. We look at that and like scoff at it, like that's stupid. Like, why would I do that? But if that's what's easy for you, that's the bridge. It's like we've got to start with what's easy and let it like carry us to where we're supposed to go with it. And what you'll find as you show up consistently, and it doesn't have to be every day, but if you're just like, yeah, I'm going to give this a chance, like I'm going to start with what's easy, what comes natural, what doesn't seem like a big fuss in my life. I'm going to just see what it feels like to even make space for this in my life. You know, like how would it even feel to sit down after I put my kids to bed for 10 minutes and do anything for myself? You know, like that alone is a practice, right? For my creative self. Like a lot of us, you know, maybe we make time for exercise, maybe we make time for the shower, but to make time for this other thing, like that alone, no matter what it is, we've got to get used to that, right? Like whether it's 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, it almost like doesn't even matter what we pick because like let's just get used to like doing something for our personal creative selves. Let's find that time slot. Like when does that happen? How does it feel? Like what conversations do I have to have with other people? What does my space have to change in order to accommodate that? Like maybe I need to get a new desk or whatever. Like it's almost this experiment of, you know, how can I find the puzzle piece and where does it fit? And then after a while of getting used to that, kind of like normalizing that level, it's like, okay, now we can look at what we're actually doing. You know, it's like that's almost like the second step. Now we can look at our watercolors for me. Like, are these squiggles interesting? So that's a part of this too. It's like it's habit forming. It's realizing, you know, what we can fit in, when and how it's going to work. Stuff that this how my mind hijacks that thought. You can't make this easy because you are so behind. Yes, meanwhile I'm paralyzed by making it hard. So true. It's so true. And I think that's so common. And you know, there's so many examples in history where you can look at people who have, you know, been successful. Like I love this example, Stephen King. You know, he is an American author that has like published so many best-selling books, the most notable, The Shining, which then turned into this amazing movie. But, you know, Stephen King started by writing short stories for his friends in school because it was fun, right? Like he wasn't thinking, how am I going to get my writing career off the ground? You know, he was in school kind of like goofing around and sneakily like selling these horror stories to his friends, you know, and then he did go to school and I think he majored in English, but it was always short stories for a long time. He didn't jump to the novels. That's way too complicated. You know, actually, I was reading up about him before this, after those school stories where he got in trouble for selling them. What he was writing about was he would watch movies and then he would write about the movies. So it's like, that's so easy, right? That's so simple. You watch a movie, then you write about it. And then that turned into, in college, he was just submitting short stories for like his brother's newspaper. And then later it was like short stories for like a men's magazine. It was like short stories, short stories, short stories. That's so much more doable than like the book. And I'm sure he had all those thoughts like, this isn't enough. I need to be writing a novel. But if you just try and force that, right, and say like, okay, Stephen, you better like sit down and write the novel, like you can't like take creativity by the reins and like shake it like that. It doesn't work that way. You have to let it be free. And so for him, it was short stories for a long time. And actually his first novel started as a short story. The first notable novel, Carrie, it wasn't supposed to be a novel. It was a short story submission for a magazine that he actually threw away, and his wife like pulled it out of the trash and was like, this is actually pretty good. Why don't we work on this? So that first start was never supposed to be anything. And it's, again, it's this trust. It's like, we've got to do the easy thing. Short stories are easy. I can sit down and I can do that. A novel, no, that's too big. And it's like, let that be enough for long enough, and it becomes the bigger thing. And then if that doesn't help you, I also like to look at outsider artists. So if you're not familiar with this term, an outsider artist is someone who's self-taught, that doesn't really have any knowledge of the art world. They're just like doing their thing outside of any known like art landscape or culture. And then usually they get discovered. And usually it's after their death, unfortunately. But there's so many examples of outsider artists. And if you look at what they're doing, it's truly like, in most cases, it is a mental health practice, this art that they're making. They're usually using it as a coping mechanism for a hardship that they have endured, or as a way to like work through something, and their art is a way to deal with life. And that's how I have seen my art practice, actually. And when I can divorce myself from like the outcome and the pressure, it really is like an act of self-care to write and to journal. Like a lot of times my art doesn't start as a drawing. I do a lot of writing, and then I'll like get this flash of an image later, like while I'm on a walk or while I'm washing dishes. But there's this one outsider artist that I was looking into to show you guys as an example. Her name is Mary T. Smith. And it's like, okay, now here's a woman. This woman, you know, her artwork is all over the world. It's and unfortunately, she didn't gain notoriety until, you know, big notoriety until after she passed. But here's a woman who, you know, she's a Black woman in the American South. She was born in the 1900s to like a sharecropper family. She's like one of 12 kids. Can you guys see my screen? Let me know in the chat if you can see my screen. And this is her art, you know, like this is her. She did this amazing, like bold, expressive artwork in her life. And she didn't start until much later in life doing these paintings, but she started drawing. She started her career, not her career, her art practice was drawing. And she had, the reason she was drawing is because she was hearing impaired. And so she felt very lonely in life because she couldn't connect the way other people connect. You know, people couldn't understand her, you know, she couldn't understand them. she was in this world that it was a disconnect. She couldn't hear them, and she turned to drawing to deal with the hardships of life. And later in life, she started painting. And it wasn't like she wasn't setting out being like, I'm gonna get into a gallery. Like that wasn't even available to her as a Black woman in the South in that time. Like there's no way that that would even be in the realm of possibility for her, unfortunately. But that's the way it was. So for her, it's not like she was marching into this painting practice as like, and for it to be anything. It was a way for her to deal with life and to channel her spirituality. She's a very spiritual woman. And she was starting with where she was at. She had this dumpster that was nearby that she would drag pieces of corrugated tin and plywood, like anything she could get her hands on. Her color palette was limited. You know, she used like a couple colors. It was like house paint. And she's doing it because it felt good. It felt good to paint. It made her like available to life. It made her feel whole. And I think that's the piece of it that sometimes gets lost. I think especially in our culture where there's just so much shared that we feel like we're behind or we feel like we're not enough because we see all these like crazy success stories, but we forget that art, that writing, that music, it's not necessarily for anything. Like it can just be for us, right? It can just be for us as a practice, just like yoga is a practice. Like people who practice yoga or meditation, they're not doing it being like, I'm going to be the best yoga person in the world. I'm going to win a yoga award, right? Like they're not doing that. They're doing it because it feels good for their body. It feels amazing to meditate, right? It's a practice. And so art, writing, music, it's the same thing. And I think some of us actually never got to experience that or know that that's actually how this works. And then it just like accidentally becomes really cool and people like want to buy it. But it actually, for a lot of artists, starts in this very like inward, selfish, self-soothing, let me just deal with myself in the world place. And this is how I'm going to deal with it. And then it like accidentally becomes something. So that's something to keep in mind too, is that really like drilling down to the core of like, what is this even? And what can this be for me? And it can be a practice that isn't for anything. I don't want it to be popular or famous. I don't want it to win an award because it was never for that. You know, it was for me. And that's how my drawing started. Now, did it end up there? No. Like after a while, I was like, ooh, I really like these drawings. Like, oh, I see a theme forming here. Oh, I want to share my work, you know, like I eventually got there, but it started as a like really like a way to deal with my situation in life. So that's a way to think about it too. But I really want to challenge you to lower the stakes with your personal creative practice and project, to think of something easy and start there just to get on this entry ramp, just to get it going. It gets to be something else later, and you've got to trust that it will. And there's a spot at the bottom of your workbook to really like fill out this permission slip, like truly give yourself permission to start here and to realize it's going to look a lot different than you originally intended. And it might not even feel good at first. You might be full of doubt, but you're going to do it anyway. And you're going to give yourself permission because that's what's going to allow you to get on the road, right? Like some of us are not even on the path. We're just sitting there like, how do I even get on here? And the way on is truly through accepting who you are right now, accepting what life is throwing your way, and then choosing whatever is related to what you want, paring it way back, choosing something so easy. It almost seems like insulting that you picked that, because it's like you're capable of so much more. You know, you want to like scale it back to that level where you're like, I can't believe that this is how I'm starting. Like it should feel that easy. And I promise, like, that is what's going to get you there. And it doesn't seem like it will, but it really, truly will. So that is what I'd love for you to think about. And we have a half an hour left. So if anyone wants to be brave, I'd love to hear, you know, if you want to do some little hot seat coaching, if you want to bring something up, I'd be happy to have you unmute and share with us, like, what are you up against? And I'm happy to kind of coach you through anything that's going on. So if you know how to use the raise your hand little symbol, and if you want to be brave and be in the spotlight, you don't have to. But if you want to work through like what came up for you while I shared all of this information, and you're like, okay, Leanne, but I still don't know what I would pick, or okay, Leanne, but I don't know how I would make this easy, or okay, Leanne, like, how does this work? You know, raise your hand and I am happy to work through that with you. So if nobody wants to do that, that is totally fine, because I know that that's scary. Oh, Hannah's here. Hi, Hannah. Let me see how I can, okay. You want to unmute yourself and let us know how it's going for you?
Sure. Hi. I did figure out how to raise my hand.
Hey,
It took me a second to find it. Can you hear me okay?
yeah.
Um, yeah, so I guess for other people in the thing that don't know, I'm doing Leanne's 100 Epic Days right now. And I'm in the middle of making a children's book, which has been going astoundingly well, compared to my other attempts to do it by myself. Um, But as I've been thinking about, what would I do next? Would I do another children's book? Would I make a children's book portfolio so that I can show it to publishers and start working for other people and not just for myself? Or would I do a completely different type of practice that has nothing to do with children's books? There's sort of and I know you talked about this, Leanne, in this webinar earlier about like the value of something. There's almost this weighing that I'm doing of, which one is going to be the most beneficial to me. The children's book made sense because I would like to be a children's book illustrator. So that was a quick, easy, like, yeah, I can make a children's book for this 100 Epic Days, and that'll benefit me in multiple ways. It'll be fun, it'll be interesting, it'll get me into this creative practice that I really want to do. But what comes next? What thing would be most beneficial to me in my arts career? What do I even want my career to be, etc.? It's like there's this like any of them are going to be valuable, but if I'm going to spend my chunk of time on a creative project or on developing a practice that might turn into something, like how do I make that decision?
Yeah, this is such a great question. Thank you so much for sharing.
Of course.
Um, yeah, you know, it's one of those things where it's kind of like our logical mind is going to talk us into all these corners with every piece of this. I feel like this actually just came up for me where I had a freelance job inquiry come in last week, and I got on a call with them, and the project sounded cool. This is for my motion design career, and but the timeline was really tight. And I was talking to my husband. I'm like, well, I could do it, and we were like logically figuring out all the reasons why and why not. And I had to give them an answer by the end of the day. And finally, my husband was like, we can't figure this out with logic. like you have to like energetically feel this out. And I was surprised to hear him say that because I was like, I can't believe you're getting all woo-woo on me. But it's one of those things where our mind is going to go in all these weird different directions and like find evidence to back everything up and shoot things down. And this is one of those things where like journaling can be really great, or meditation, or just taking a long walk and letting your intuition guide you. And I know that doesn't feel like a great answer, but it's so personal, you know? And it's also one of those things where it's like any direction you take is exactly perfect, because you're going to learn what pivot to take next based on what you picked. So like you might start down one road and be like, oh, actually, this doesn't feel right. And then you'll pivot to the thing you were supposed to pick anyway. So that's kind of how I've dealt with this kind of like, oh my gosh, so many options, analysis paralysis. It's just like, no matter what I pick, it's exactly perfect because I'm in motion. And when I'm in motion, I am understanding what I'm doing. I can't sit at the beginning and look and understand it. I have to be in it and then use my intuition to like suss out how I'm feeling about it. Does that make sense? I know that's not like a great answer, but
Yeah, it does make sense. I have gotten better at trusting my gut over time, but I'm still a very analytical person. And so even if my gut says, hey, this would be a good way for you to go, my brain still says, but logically, what would be a better way? And I can get, too caught up in that a lot of the time. So it's good to be reminded to step back and just kind of let my intuition have a say in things.
yeah. And I also always choose like, what's the easiest thing to do? Like what feels juicier? Like what would I want to take action on? And I was deciding that with this next card deck. I'm working on my second card deck. And logically, my brain was like, you already made a card deck. You should make something different, because I've been wanting to make this like custom journal that goes along with my old deck and a new one. But I was like, you should do that because that makes sense for like the product line you're building out. And I was sitting there like, ugh, I don't want to do that. It's almost like this little kid, like, oh, I don't feel like it, And what I felt like doing was making new drawings for a new thing. I wasn't sure if it was going to be a new deck or something new, but that's what I chose because that's what I knew I would show up for. And again, it goes back to like what is going to feel good, because that's what you're going to return to. So that's where the logical mind, it can only get us so far, because like, sure, we can force it, but if it's not feeling good, we're not going to want to show up for it anyway, especially if we have a day job, like other stuff going on. To show up for something that doesn't even feel good just because like logically it makes sense, and it's like the seen path of like what would make sense for your future or your product line or whatever. It's like, yeah, but can't we just get there another way? Like, why can't it be this other way? And maybe some surprises will come that I didn't even know about until I started down that path. I don't know if that helps too.
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Cool. Okay. Does anyone else want to share or ask any questions or work through anything? We have a couple more minutes. Oh, Fatima, how are you? Tell us what's going on.
Hi.
Hi.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah. So I have been doing journaling for a long time now, and I have a habit of writing in my journal since 2017 daily. Since 2018, I do bullet journaling every day.
Amazing.
And I published a journal in 2021, which sold more than 1,000 copies. And that was because I had contact with a few people and other communities who sold it. But now I have raised such an expectation with my previous work that I find it hard to continue and do other things. And there's so much time I spend on the computer that I don't do work away from the computer as well. And like the others, there's just so much choice out there that I struggle to stick with one thing for a too long time. That led to overthinking.
Yeah.
So this is one thing. I mean, and I know that if I wrote a book about my journey, then it would be good for me, but still I finish other people's work quicker than mine.
Oh my gosh, this is great. Yeah, I think we can all relate to this, right? It's like we get crushed by the pressure, right? The expectations. What is it supposed to be? Now, especially when you've seen some success, it's like, woo, now the pressure's on. Now I have to repeat the success. I have to make it bigger and better. Is that kind of what's coming up for you?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And that can just like crush an artist's soul, right? Because we can't create from this constricted place. It's like having a wet blanket on or like handcuffs. Like we can't be free. We have to be free. And it's really this like maintenance of our mind to say, to like bear witness to our thoughts and say, I see you. I see what you're thinking. Thank you for those thoughts. And then to like put that aside and listen to that intuition side of us that's calling us somewhere and following that and that trust piece of like this might not sell as many copies. This might not turn into anything, but I'm feeling pulled here. It's like a pull and I can feel it. And I don't know what's on the other side. And if we can like ground into that, it's like that will feel good because it's calling us, right? Versus starting in a place where it's like, it should be this, and there's expectations, and it's going to make this amount of money and sell this amount of copies. It's like, how can you create from there, right? It doesn't feel good. It has to feel good. It's almost like a sensual experience creating, right? It's got to feel like so warm and juicy and right in order to show up for that, especially if you've got other stuff going on. You've got like kids or jobs or whatever. To have those 20 minutes or whatever it's going to be for you, it's got to feel good. And it's a practice. I really think it's a mental practice that we have to show up every day. And if you're into journaling, it could literally be a new journaling practice of noticing how you're feeling about the project, like a separate journal. Like this journal is all about my negative self-talk or like these other feelings about the project, and really just honing that skill of like self-awareness around it might open you up in ways that might help with it. Oh, you're muted. Hold on.
Thank you for the advice.
Yeah, I'm excited for you. I think it's all like we all have the capacity to be successful. Like we all have the capacity to make this work. And it's really, again, it's like the self-acceptance thing. It's like, what do we have going on right now? How can we make it easy? How can we make it feel good? And how
Hey, can we all hear each other?
Yes, we can. I can.
Okay. Maybe she'll come
too.
back.
Yes, I can.
Maybe Leanne will come back. I hope so.
Yeah. Oh, where?
I guess while we wait, if anybody else wants to go, and I will document it or in the chat if you want. But
Yeah,
also,
that's a good idea.
Yeah.
I thought it was really, really useful.
super, yeah.
For me, I mean, I've been to a few of Leanne's short form things before, but this is the first time I really thought about uh, reaching for that place where it's fun and it feels good. And it's not just about the discipline of, spend your 20 minutes a day doing
Yeah.
your thing, because that way you'll get it done, because that's the way I've been thinking about it, is like, I got to spend this time. It's got to be a regular practice. But oddly enough, I had just recently started kind of on a similar track, just of my own accord, which was doing little watercolor paintings, because I've never painted. I've never painted. Like, it's never been something that I learned how to do. So
Mhm.
I had this set of watercolors, and I was kind of chiding myself because it's like probably the 5th or 6th set of watercolors I've bought in my life. But every time I move to a new place, I buy another set of watercolors, and then they just sit around doing nothing. And I was just challenging myself to use them. And so I started using them, and I found it was just really enjoyable. So I just started
Wow.
playing with them, and I just have been finding that really fun, but I haven't really been thinking about it as, just like she was saying, I haven't been thinking about it as something that will lead to anything or be anything or do anything for me beyond just be an enjoyable way to use an art supply that I felt like I was wasting.
I think that's so special. And
she's
I
back.
actually, oh yeah, she is.
Hi,
Can
Leanne.
you guys, hi, can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we
Yes.
can.
Oh my gosh, my power went out.
Oh
I'm
no.
on my
Oh,
phone.
no.
Can you guys see me and hear
Yes.
me?
Perfect. Mhm.
Oh my gosh, can you believe that? Well, here it's a group program where I bring people through this journey of a 100-day adventure where I have everyone like pick one thing and we do it together. And there's like a live element where we check in via Zoom twice a month. And there's a community where I'm posting every day and everyone has a check-in every day. So that's my 100 Epic Day program. But what I've done is taken that and packaged it up into a self-led digital course. So this is like all that step-by-step teaching that I do in the beginning of the program, where I like take people through. You got a taste of it here in this workshop, but it's very much like methodical, step-by-step. Like, I take you through how to pick your goal, how to scope your goal, how to like set yourself up for success, how to like plan, different methods that I use to ensure it's sustainable and that you actually stick with it. So all those things that I take people through in the program, I've now created these pre-recorded lessons, and there's worksheets that go along with each lesson to like really interactively filling it out and doing the work. And then after that, after you're like, okay, I picked my goal, I've scoped it, then I bring you through these guided their first 10 days. So I have a video recording of like day 1, day 2, and I give you a tracker. So you get to pick a 10-day journey or a 30-day journey. And I bring you through the first 10 days, and all of the people that I brought through this program, including myself, I've kind of analyzed what comes up for people in those first 10 days, and it's very predictable. So I kind of share like, here's what you're going to be feeling on day 1. Like, here's what you're most likely going to be feeling on day 2. So it's really fun because the first 10 days are truly the hardest. Like, after day 10, you're kind of like, okay, I've got this, I can do this. So I bring you through those first 10 days, and it's really fun. So I have that course right now. If you go to epicbones.com, in the work with me section, you will see the Epic Start course. That's my new course. And right now it's $397. But if you use the coupon code EPIC100, you can get $100 off that program. So that's going to bring it down to $297. So that's really exciting. I'm offering that to you guys until Friday. This Friday at midnight Eastern Standard Time is the last time to get that discount. So if you've been kind of peeping on my 100 Epic Day journey, I'm like, oh, that's kind of a big investment. I don't know if I could take that on, but you're interested in the course. This is a very like low key yet very impactful way. And you can also do it on your own time. So some people, you know, the 100-day program might feel like a lot because you're like, oh, geez, I have to be there and commit and all this stuff. But in this way, in the course, you can do all the learning at your own time and then pick your start date versus having to be on my schedule and be like, oh my gosh, we have to start on this day. It's a little bit more approachable for some people. So that's my new course, Epic Start. Some of you did my Epic Start challenge. There's little pieces of that in there, but it's very like fleshed out and very much like step by step. Like by the end of this, I will truly feel empowered to have like a sustainable creative practice or project that I can really stick with and move forward with and have the structure to do that. So that is my invitation for you. I will be putting the link in the Facebook group and emailing out. And then that Epic 100 discount code will also be available for my 100 Epic Days program. So if that sounds attractive to you, that's my live 4-month program where we're truly like in it to win it together, like on the hook. We're all doing it together. That's on pre-sale right now for $2,100, and there's also payment plans for that. So with the Epic 100 discount code, you can get $100 off of that as well until